There has been a lot of controversy when it comes to Sokka and how the Netflix adaptation handled Sokka in the first season of their incarnation of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Plenty of fans started side-eyeing the show when they released this statement from a cast interview. We took out the element of how sexist Sokka was. I feel like there were a lot of moments in the original show that were iffy. Okay, not exactly something you should say when it comes to character building right before your show premieres. My initial reaction to that news was to groan and roll my eyes because there's been this trend in Hollywood where characters are getting outright sanitized of their character flaws in order to make them have more marketable or acceptable characters. Because after all, when you can clip anything on the internet nowadays, basically having a character act sexist out of context will get you a lot of engagement basically anywhere, and then we see people trying to quote cancel and quote that character. And that character gains this reputation. So, what studios are doing for less desirable flaws, such as, sexism, is to simply throw them out. We saw this with Disney's Pinocchio remake, where they basically threw out every single bad deed he basically did in the movie in order to make him more palpable, which is ridiculous. And then I watched the show. My sentiments really haven't changed on it. In fact, I still think the writing flaws, such as pacing and dialogue, far outshine anything else. But here's my take on the show's take on Sokka's arc. Let's take a look at the original for a second. Sokka is a boy who grew up in a block of ice in the middle of what used to be a united sovereign water tribe, now basically fractured into nothing but small villages. Outside of an incident involving the Sovereign Raiders, which killed his mother, Sokka really hasn't ever seen war. When he became man of the village, since all the warriors left for the war, Sokka basically played soldier. And is it really playing soldier when he is effectively the only person capable and willing to play the role of soldier? Let's see what he had to work with. He had to work with little children who can't fight yet. He had to work with the elderly who did their fighting in their youth. And he had to work with people who are not willing to be soldiers, such as the women. To him, he's been surrounded by women who do the cooking, the cleaning, and just making clothes. That's really it. That's all he's ever had to deal with. He was effectively the only soldier. His romantic view of being a warrior is broken when he comes into contact with a bunch of actual warriors. To add insult to injury, they actually defy the gender roles of the Sovereign Water Tribe and basically kick his butt. Romanticism is phased out for realism as he experiences the other aspects of war like loss and deception. Then, after all that, he questions whether he can truly be anything of use, let alone a warrior, and he bitterly works to become the warrior he needed to be rather than the romantic vision of a warrior in his head. The live action adaptation of Sokka kinda has this arc, but it's done in a much sloppier manner. I do like they give him more of a strained relationship with Hakoda over whether or not Sokka is ready to be a warrior. That's good. But I think they made Sokka too capable in this. His fight with Zuko is less humiliatingly lopsided as it was in the show, but okay, there is some wiggle room, and we can work with that. That's not the end of the world. What is the problem is that he's way too humble. Don't get me wrong, he's still prideful, but that pride is nowhere near the level of pride in the cartoon. I get that this is a live action show and they have to tone down the pride, but still, the gaps between them are basically the distance between here and the moon. Netflix's Sokka seems to be way more aware that he's not the warrior he wants to be. You could attribute that to deep down he knows his father's opinion of him, but why couldn't they say he was trying to overcompensate too much with sarcasm, wit, and arrogance? Hell, they do say that with his interactions with Yue. But that brings us back to the issue with this show. This show is so chock full of exposition that you skip out on meaningful character interactions and actually showing these character traits rather than telling them. And those character interactions have to give us something to latch onto, which isn't good when you start chucking them out in order to make room for more lore. I'm sure half the problems in this series can still be chalked up to dialogue and pacing. To recap, Sokka's arc is less about him becoming less sexist and more about him being thrown from the pedestal of the romantic warrior hero that he wants to be, since he did grow up in a block of ice. And the problem with the Netflix series is how they lowered that pedestal too much, to the point that his arc ends up far flatter and far more subdued compared to the original series. And it doesn't help that the dialogue and pacing are bad, and it only further detaches us from the character and the character's emotions and actions. Sexism in his arc is less of a driving force and more like an important side character, if you know what I mean. Those are just my thoughts. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off.